What happens when Hollywood's most beloved actress walks into what she thinks is a friendly late-night interview, only to discover the host has been plotting to ambush her with the most personal and painful moments of her career? What you're about to hear is the shocking truth behind Jennifer Lawrence's explosive confrontation that ended with security escorting her off the set, and why the host's behavior that night crossed every line of professional decency. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about late-night television. The atmosphere in Studio 6A should have been electric with anticipation. Jennifer Lawrence, fresh off her latest blockbuster success, was scheduled for what was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. The audience was buzzing, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed perfectly normal as she walked onto the stage with that trademark smile that had won over millions of fans worldwide. She waved to the crowd, settled into the guest chair, and prepared for what she assumed would be the usual light-hearted banter about her new projects, maybe some funny anecdotes, and the kind of easygoing conversation that had made her previous talk show appearances so memorable. But Jimmy had other plans entirely. From the moment she sat down, something felt different. There was a coldness in his demeanor that she hadn't expected, a calculating look in his eyes that made her instinctively straighten in her chair. The audience was still applauding, still cheering for one of their favorite stars, completely unaware that they were about to witness something unprecedented in late-night television history. "Jennifer, Jennifer, Jennifer," Jimmy began, his voice carrying an edge that immediately put her on alert. "You know, I've been doing some research for tonight's show, and I have to say, there are some fascinating things that have come to light about your career that I think our audience would love to hear about." The way he emphasized the word fascinating sent a chill down her spine. This wasn't the tone of someone preparing to discuss her latest film or share amusing behind-the-scenes stories. This was the tone of someone who had come prepared for battle. "Oh, okay," Jennifer replied, trying to maintain her composure while her internal alarm bells started ringing. "What kind of things are we talking about?" Jimmy leaned back in his chair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, let's start with something that I'm sure has been weighing on your mind lately. The whole situation with your ex-boyfriend, Nicholas Hoult. You know, the one where you allegedly cheated on him with your married co-star during the filming of that little franchise that made you famous." The studio fell silent. The audience, who had been expecting laughs and entertainment, suddenly found themselves witnessing something far more uncomfortable. Jennifer's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, anger, before settling into a mask of professional control that couldn't quite hide the hurt in her eyes. "I'm sorry, what?" she said, her voice steady but with an unmistakable tremor of disbelief. "Jimmy, that's not something I'm comfortable discussing, and frankly, it's not accurate." But Jimmy wasn't backing down. If anything, her discomfort seemed to energize him. "Oh, come on, Jennifer. Your fans deserve to know the real you, don't they? I mean, we're all friends here. Surely you can be honest about what really happened during those late-night rehearsals." "Jimmy, I need you to stop this right now," Jennifer said, her voice growing firmer. "Whatever you think you know, whatever tabloid garbage you've been reading, this isn't appropriate for a talk show. This isn't what we agreed to discuss." The host chuckled, a sound devoid of any warmth or humor. "Isn't it interesting how celebrities always want to control the narrative? You come on shows like this to promote your movies, to sell your image, but when someone wants to have a real conversation about who you really are, suddenly it's inappropriate." Jennifer looked around the studio, her eyes scanning the faces of the production crew, searching for someone, anyone, who might step in and stop this nightmare from continuing. But everyone seemed frozen, unsure of how to handle a situation that had spiraled so far outside the bounds of normal television protocol. "A real conversation?" Jennifer's voice was rising now, her famous composure beginning to crack under the pressure of the unprovoked attack. "Jimmy, there's a difference between a real conversation and whatever this is. You're spreading rumors. and lies about my personal life on national television. This isn't journalism, it's tabloid sensationalism at its worst. Tabloid sensationalism? Jimmy repeated, his voice dripping with mock offense. Jennifer, these aren't just rumors. I have sources, people who were there, people who saw what happened. Are you saying they're all lying? The audience was shifting, uncomfortably in their seats now, the energy in the room having completely transformed from excitement to tension. Some people were whispering to each other. Others were pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic television moment, though not for the reasons anyone had anticipated. Jennifer took a deep breath, and when she spoke, again her voice had transformed. Gone was any trace of the accommodating celebrity guest. In its place was someone who had been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. Jimmy, I don't know what game you think you're playing here, but I'm not going to sit in this chair and let you attack my character based on whatever lies someone fed you. If you want to have a conversation about my work, about my films, about the craft of acting, I'm all for it. But if you think you can ambush me with personal attacks and expect me to just smile and take it, you've seriously miscalculated. The host's smile widened, but there was something predatory about it now. Miscalculated? Jennifer, I think you're the one who's miscalculating. You see, this is my show, this is my stage, and these are my questions. If you don't want to answer them, well, that tells the audience everything they need to know about what kind of person you really are, doesn't it? That was the moment when Jennifer Lawrence realized she wasn't dealing with a professional broadcaster having a bad night. She was facing someone who had deliberately planned this attack, someone who had invited her onto his show with the specific intention of humiliating her in front of millions of viewers. The betrayal of that realization hit her like a physical blow, and her expression hardened in a way that made everyone in the studio suddenly understand that they were about to witness something extraordinary. What kind of person I really am, she repeated slowly, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge that made even Jimmy pause for a moment. Jimmy, you want to know what kind of person I really am? I'm the kind of person who won't sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no understanding of basic human decency or professional ethics. Jennifer Lawrence Story. Section 2. She stood up from her chair, and the sudden movement sent a ripple of shock through the entire studio. The audience gasped collectively, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. But Jimmy wasn't intimidated. Instead, he seemed almost delighted by her reaction, as if her anger was exactly what he had been hoping to provoke. "Oh, are we having a moment here, Jennifer?" he said with theatrical concern, his voice loud enough to ensure the microphones caught every word. "Are you going to storm off my set because someone finally asked you the hard questions? Is this how you handle accountability?" Jennifer turned to face him fully, her posture radiating controlled fury. "Accountability? Jimmy, you want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability as a host, as a professional, as a human being. You invited me here under false pretenses. You ambushed me with personal attacks based on gossip and lies, and now you're trying to manipulate the situation to make me look like the unreasonable one." "I'm trying to have an honest conversation," Jimmy replied, spreading his hands as if he were the picture of innocence. "But apparently honesty is something you're not comfortable with. Maybe that's why your last 3 relationships ended the way they did." The collective intake of breath from the audience was audible. Even the camera operators seemed to flinch at the cruelty of the statement. Jimmy had just crossed a line that no professional interviewer should ever cross, and everyone in the room knew it. Jennifer's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "My relationships? Jimmy, are you seriously going to sit there and psychoanalyze my personal life based on tabloid headlines? Do you have any idea how pathetic that makes you sound? Do you realize that right now, in this moment, you're showing your audience exactly what kind of man you are?" "What kind of man am I, Jennifer?" Jimmy asked, leaning forward with predatory interest. "Please, enlighten us. Tell America what you really think." You're a man who's so desperate for ratings, so hungry for viral moments, that you're willing to destroy someone's reputation on national television, Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the studio like a blade. You're someone who hides behind the facade of entertainment while engaging in the most cowardly form of bullying imaginable. You invite people onto your show, people who trust you to treat them with basic respect, and then you attack them when they're most vulnerable. The host's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. Vulnerable? Jennifer, you're one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. You're hardly vulnerable. Money doesn't make someone bulletproof against cruelty, Jimmy. She shot back. And the fact that you think it does shows just how disconnected you are from basic human empathy. Success doesn't give you the right to tear people down for entertainment. Entertainment? Jimmy laughed, but there was an edge of desperation creeping into his voice now. Jennifer, this is a talk show. Entertainment is literally what we do. Here, if you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be in show business. Jennifer stepped closer to his desk, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Tough questions? Jimmy, asking me about my upcoming projects is a tough question. Asking me about my preparation for challenging roles is a tough question. What you're doing isn't asking tough questions, it's character assassination, and there's a massive difference between the two. The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the confrontation unfolding before them. Many of them had their phones out, recording what they instinctively knew was going to be one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. Jimmy tried to regain control of the situation. Look, Jennifer, I understand you're upset, but let's be reasonable here. Sit back down, we can move on to talking about your new movie, and everyone can just relax. Reasonable? Jennifer's voice rose to a level that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Jimmy, you think you can spend 10 minutes attacking my character, spreading lies about my personal relationships, and then just move on like nothing happened? You think you can flip a switch, and suddenly we're going to have a nice, friendly chat about my career? I think you're overreacting, Jimmy said, but his confidence was clearly shaken. This is how interviews work, Jennifer. We ask questions. You answer them. That's the format. No, Jimmy, that's not how interviews work, Jennifer replied, her voice steady but filled with controlled rage. Interviews work when both parties operate with mutual respect and professionalism. What you've done tonight is the opposite of professional. You've turned your show into a platform for personal attacks, and you've shown your audience that you're willing to betray the trust of your guests for the sake of ratings. Jimmy tried a different approach, his voice taking on a tone of mock reasonableness. Jennifer, I think you're being a little dramatic here. We're all adults. We can discuss difficult topics without it becoming personal. Without it becoming personal? Jennifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. Jimmy, you made it personal the moment you started spreading lies about my relationships. You made it personal when you decided to turn this interview into an ambush. You made it personal when you chose to prioritize sensationalism over basic human decency. The host was clearly struggling now, his carefully planned attack having backfired spectacularly. Instead of the compliant celebrity he had expected to steamroll, he was facing someone who was not only fighting back, but doing so with an eloquence and intensity that was making him look smaller by the minute. Jennifer, I think we need to take a commercial break, Jimmy said, looking toward his production team for support. Oh no, Jimmy, Jennifer said, her voice cutting through his attempt to escape. You wanted to have this conversation in front of your audience, so let's have it. You wanted honesty, so let's be honest. Let's talk about what's really happening here. What's really happening here is that you're having some kind of breakdown on my show, Jimmy said, his desperation now barely concealed. Jennifer's eyes blazed. A breakdown? Jimmy, what's really happening here is that you're finally being held accountable for your behavior. You're used to guests who will smile and nod and play along with whatever game you want to play. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to call you out for exactly what you are. And what am I, Jennifer? Jimmy asked, though he clearly regretted the question the moment it left his mouth. "You're a bully who hides behind the power of your platform," Jennifer said without hesitation. "You're someone who thinks that having a television show gives you the right to tear people down for sport. You're a man who has confused cruelty with cleverness, and tonight, in front of all these people, you've shown everyone exactly who you really are." The studio fell into an almost oppressive silence. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure of how to handle a situation that had spiraled so far beyond anything they had ever experienced. Jimmy looked around desperately, searching for some way to regain control, but Jennifer wasn't finished with him yet. "You know what the saddest part about all of this is, Jimmy?" Jennifer continued, her voice now carrying a weight that made everyone in the studio lean forward to catch every word. "The saddest part is that you had the opportunity to have a real conversation with someone who has genuinely interesting things to say about art, about craft, about the challenges of working in this industry. Instead, you chose to wallow in gossip and lies because you thought it would be easier, more sensational, more likely to go viral." Jimmy tried to interrupt, but Jennifer held up her hand, and the gesture was so commanding that he actually fell silent. "I'm not finished," she said, her voice calm but carrying an authority that filled the entire studio. "You want to know what's really going viral tonight, Jimmy? It's not your gotcha questions or your tabloid tactics. What's going viral is the moment when everyone watching this show realizes that you're not actually a very good interviewer. You're just someone who got lucky enough to get a platform, and you've spent tonight proving that you don't deserve it." The audience was completely transfixed now. Some were recording on their phones, others were simply staring in amazement at what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a masterclass in how to defend yourself against someone who had crossed every line of professional conduct. Jimmy made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Jennifer, I think you're taking this way too seriously. We're just having a conversation here. There's no need to get so worked up about it." Jennifer's laugh was sharp and incredulous. "Taking it too seriously? Jimmy, you just spent 15 minutes trying to destroy my reputation on national television, and you think I'm taking it too seriously? Do you have any idea how that sounds? Do you realize that you're essentially telling me that I should just accept being attacked and smile about it?" "I wasn't attacking you," Jimmy protested weakly. "I was just asking questions." "No, Jimmy, you weren't just asking questions," Jennifer replied, her voice rising with renewed intensity. "You were spreading lies, you were making personal attacks, and you were doing it all with that smug smile on your face like you thought you were so clever. But here's what you didn't count on. Here's what you didn't expect. You didn't expect me to fight back." The host looked around desperately at his production team, clearly hoping someone would step in and end this nightmare for him. But his staff seemed as mesmerized by Jennifer's performance as the audience was. "You thought you could ambush me," Jennifer continued, her voice now carrying a power that seemed to fill every corner of the studio. "You thought you could catch me off guard, make me stumble, make me look bad in front of your audience. But what you've actually done is shown everyone watching exactly what happens when someone with integrity faces off against someone without it." "Jennifer, please," Jimmy said, and for the first time all night, there was genuine pleading in his voice. "Can we just move on from this?" "Move on?" Jennifer's eyes flashed with renewed fire. "Jimmy, you can't just attack someone's character and then ask to move on when it doesn't go the way you planned. You can't spread lies about someone's personal life and then expect them to just forget about it and chat about their latest movie. That's not how this works." She turned to address the audience directly, her voice carrying clearly through the studio. "I want everyone here to understand what just happened tonight. This man invited me onto his show, and then he tried to humiliate me based on false information. He tried to turn my appearance here into a spectacle, into entertainment at my expense. And when I refused to play along, when I stood up for myself, he tried to make me look like the unreasonable one." The audience was hanging on every word, many of them nodding in agreement with her assessment of the situation. Jimmy looked smaller and smaller in his chair. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "But here's what I want you to really understand," Jennifer said, her voice growing even more powerful. "When someone treats you the way this man treated me tonight, you don't have to take it. You don't have to smile and be polite and pretend like it's okay. You have the right to stand up for yourself, to call out bad behavior, and to refuse to be someone else's entertainment." Jimmy made one final attempt to regain some semblance of control. "Jennifer, I think we should really take that commercial break now." "No, Jimmy," Jennifer said firmly. "You wanted to have this conversation in front of your audience, so we're going to finish it. You wanted honesty, so let's be completely honest. What happened here tonight is that you revealed yourself to be someone who values sensationalism over integrity, someone who thinks having a television show gives you the right to attack your guests, and someone who clearly doesn't understand the difference between entertainment and cruelty." The studio was so quiet that you could hear people shifting in their seats, the sound of phones recording, the barely audible whispers of audience members commenting to each other about what they were witnessing. "And you know what else happened tonight, Jimmy?" Jennifer continued, her voice now carrying a finality that made everyone realize this confrontation was reaching its climax. "You showed everyone that when someone fights back against a bully, the bully reveals exactly how weak they really are. You've spent this entire interview trying to tear me down, but all you've accomplished is tearing yourself down." Jimmy looked around desperately, his eyes pleading with his production team to intervene, but nobody seemed willing or able to stop what was happening. Jennifer picked up her purse from beside the guest chair and slung it over her shoulder. "I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to have a professional conversation about my career. Instead, I found myself having to defend my character against someone who clearly has none of his own." She turned to face Jimmy one last time, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "Jimmy, I hope that someday you'll look back on tonight and realize what you've become. I hope you'll understand that having power doesn't give you the right to abuse it, and that being on television doesn't make you important if you use that platform to hurt people." "Jennifer, please don't leave like this," Jimmy said, his voice now openly desperate. "We can work this out. We can have a proper interview." Jennifer shook her head slowly. "No, Jimmy, we can't. Because a proper interview requires mutual respect, and you've made it clear that respect isn't something you're capable of. I won't sit here and pretend that what you did tonight was acceptable, and I won't give you the chance to do it again." As she walked toward the edge of the stage, the audience began to applaud. It started slowly with just a few people clapping, but it quickly grew into thunderous applause that filled the entire studio. The audience was on their feet, cheering, for someone who had refused to be bullied, who had stood up for herself with grace and power. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, watching his show fall apart around him. The applause continued as Jennifer waved to the audience, acknowledging their support with a dignity that stood in stark contrast to the host's behavior throughout the evening. "Security!" Jimmy called out desperately, his voice barely audible, over the applause. "Security! Please escort Miss Lawrence from the building." Jennifer stopped and turned back to him, a look of complete incredulity on her face. "Really, Jimmy? You're calling security on me? After everything you've done tonight, you're going to have me escorted out like I'm some kind of threat?" But she didn't wait for his answer. Instead, she turned back to the audience and spoke directly to them one final time. "Thank you all for your support tonight. Remember what you saw here. Remember how someone in power tried to tear down someone else for entertainment, and remember that you always have the right to stand up for what's right." The security guards approached hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Jennifer held up her hand to them. "It's okay, I'm leaving on my own. I wouldn't want to spend another minute in this place anyway." As she walked toward the exit, the applause reached a crescendo. The audience was cheering not just for Jennifer Lawrence, the actress, but for Jennifer Lawrence, the person who had refused to be broken by someone else's cruelty. Jimmy sat in his chair staring at the chaos around him, finally understanding that his attempt to create a viral moment had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but not in the way he had intended. He had indeed created something that would be talked about for years to come, but he had also destroyed his own reputation in the process. The last image of the night was Jennifer Lawrence walking out of that studio with her head held high, having turned what was meant to be her humiliation into her triumph, and leaving behind a host who had learned too late that some people cannot be broken, no matter how hard you try. So what do you think about Jennifer's response to Jimmy's attack? Was she right to call him out so directly, or should she have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal what really happens when the cameras are rolling.